looks identical to the E model we have over there because all of the Cobras essentially were just improvements in armament, larger engines, more stout transmission, different weapon systems. This one has the tow, and I didn't fire the tow until I was back in the States. So this is going to be about starting in 1968. I graduated out of flight school. I did really well and liked the right people, and I got to go directly to the Cobras at Hunter Army Airfield. Got checked out in the Cobra, and then immediately went over to Vietnam. So the first tour, I started off at LZ Sharon. You can see up there, and that's everybody's probably pretty familiar with the I Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, 4 Corps. Of course, all of this is South Vietnam. DMZ is right up there. So I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division in the 229th Aviation Battalion, Delta Company, which is a gun company. We had all Cobras. So this was our area of operations, our AO. And LZ Sharon lies right there where the star is. You probably remember Quan Tri, capital city of Hue, Tay Mai, Phu Bai, Da Nang. So it kind of gives you an orchestration of where we were located at. You also probably remember about the Battle of Combat Base in Khe Sanh. Marines were set up on by the, when I say Charlie, Charlie is going to refer to both North Vietnamese regulars that were in South Vietnam or the Viet Cong. We just all called them Charlie. Anybody who was an aggressor. Anyway, Combat Base in Khe Sanh is right there. The Ah Valley, you probably remember some of the discussions about that in the news. That's right there where that started. And then a little bit later, I'll talk about a place called Utah Beach, which was kind of significant for me. So when I landed, got into LZ Sharon, this is our living conditions. I don't think there was a solid sided building in the entire LZ, but that's what they were for, is simply a landing zone. When I first got there and I looked around, I was glad that my parents took me camping a lot, because that's exactly what we did, was we camped. This is not a picture of my tent, but it's identical to the tent that I was in. Sandbags around the side for the mortar attacks. And Sharon, we had mortar attacks every second to third night. So it's a very active area. When I first got there, I was the new guy in the tent, and we had 5 officers in one GP medium tent with the sandbags all around. So the first night when I got in there, they told me that when the mortars started coming in, to grab your weapon, and right outside this spot right here, about another 5-10 feet, was the entrance to our bunker. That's where we eventually we learned to actually sleep in the bunker because of Charlie's activity around there. Anyway, I think it was the first or second night I was there. I had just dropped off to sleep, and all of a sudden, bam! I heard the shot inside the tent. Of course, we had mosquito netting all over the top of the tent. And I was into that mosquito netting like you wouldn't believe. In fact, I was so into it that I couldn't hardly move. I mean, I was completely wrapped up between my sleep bag and mosquito netting. And then I heard the laughter. And all my tent mates, pals that we were, right? They were just laughing their rear ends off because those. And they came over, and I thought that they were laughing just a little bit too hard, but they came over and they cut the mosquito netting off and helped me set my bunk up. They said, "That's your number one lesson. You got to learn how to get out of your bunk, out of mosquito netting, get your weapon, and head down into the bunker." So that was my orientation into Vietnam. Combat operations. This is the combat base in Khe Sanh prior to the siege in '68, and it's a big fire base, and mainly Marine Corps were there, and they were trying to interdict the supply lines from the North Vietnam into South Vietnam. So that's what they were doing there. That's just another picture of Khe Sanh during the Tet Offensive, January through April of '68. And first month I was in country, well, we flew every day around Khe Sanh, not only around the combat base itself, but also their outlying areas. I think I've got a picture of that coming up. But this is what Caisson was doing a lot of. They probably have 100 howitzers there, anywhere from 105 to 8-inch, and they were interdicting Chinese movements in that area. And we were providing backup support to them with our gunships. The one artillery PCC, there's a 155, the next one a little lower is a 105 howitzer, and the rockets that we carried on our Cobras, and you see them in the display over there. We had, in 68, we had 10-pound warheads, which is about an 81 millimeter mortar equivalent explosive force. And then in my second tour, we had the 17-pound warheads, which was equivalent to the 105 howitzer. So when we went out on a mission and our ground troops were requesting additional fire support, they would normally call in artillery, but they got in the habit of calling us because we were a little bit more accurate than the artillery. And we had 78 or 76 rockets on a hog configuration. So that was a lot of artillery to put down at one point in time. This is one of the hilltop outposts. I think there were about 7 of them, as I remember. They were northeast of Caisson. And the first time I got fired on was at one of these hilltop outposts. We went over, we had been asked by Caisson Control to go look at the outpost because they had called during the night that there would be an attack. And they thought they were going to be overrun, and then they lost contact with them. So we went over and did a recon on top of the, and there was nobody moving on there. There's dead bodies all over the place. And so I was front seat, so I was operating the turret, the minigun. My backseat, the aircraft commander, went down and did a slow circle around it. And then he just kind of flew over the top of the area to see if we could find any injured folks out there to call in dust off for, and nobody was moving. And about that time, we had two thumps right close to us. They were VC mortars. And what they had done is they had overrun this outpost, and they left their mortars in position because they were already zeroed in on the combat base, waiting for us to come in and look at them with our helicopters. And fortunately, we got out of there with a couple shrapnel holes. But Charlie was rather sneaky. After we finished up with Caisson, we went over into the AH-1 Valley, which I showed you on the map a little bit earlier. And this is a picture of the valley facing south. If anybody's been to the AH-1, there's a little tiny white strip right there. And that's the Louis airstrip. There's an old French runway that Charlie used. In fact, one of the days during this was called Operation Delaware, when the first Cav and the 101st Airborne both went into the AH-1 Valley. And the reason the AH-1 Valley was so important was it was the only really good road network from North Vietnam and Laos down into South Vietnam. So a lot of their supplies went through the AH-1 Valley. And that was our purpose for being there, was to try and interdict that supply chain. When we first went into the AH-1 Valley, our mission was to establish a place called LZ Pepper, just simply on a hilltop. And what the plan was, they were going to insert, I think on the very first day of Operation Delaware, I think they had planned for 11 or 12 outposts or landing zones that they were going to put in there so they could bring in artillery and fire from these hilltop outposts. You can't see the top of the hills here because of the clouds, but there was an LZ Pepper was right there. We were going to put another one on right there, and there was another one over here below us. And the briefing before we went into the AH-1, and I was the new guy in the troop. All the other guys, I noticed that nobody was joking, nobody was kidding, making funny and stuff like that. That's because the intelligence briefing said this was our sector. This is the first Cav sector. And there were, I don't know, well over 100 aircraft were committed to this one sector. They said that they had known 51 caliber anti-aircraft positions. They had over 50 of them, and there was a known 10 to 15 37 millimeter anti-aircraft. That's the old World War II flight guns, just in this sector of the valley. So everybody was really nervous. And of course, this being my really first big operation, I was semi-nervous myself. So LZ Pepper, as we went in, we had 5 Hueys that we were escorting. We had 3 Cobras. It was a heavy fire team. We were one of the 3. My aircraft commander was AMC, which is Losing Air Mission Commander. So he was in charge of all 3 of the Cobras, heavy fire team. And as we were approaching LZ Pepper, we started taking fire from that anti-aircraft battery. It was very close and just uphill from the up the ridge line from LZ Pepper. So we and that's what those 37 millimeters look like. So what we did is, and I thought this was very brilliant of my aircraft commander, and eventually all of us began to think like this. The AA battery was here. This is the area where we needed to go. So there was clouds up here. So he took all 3 of us over here, and then he sent 2 of them up to orbit in the clouds. So the AA people would keep their eye on them, and it'd be easy to see. We went down low level, down into the valley, around the mountain. This ridgeline continues like this. We went around this way, came back in, still low level, not really low level, it's more terrain flying, about 100, 150 feet. And then we popped up right on the backside, hoping that these AA folks would still have their weapon trained in that direction. And when we popped up, sure enough, the gun was pointing the other direction. Everybody was looking at that way. My AC put in about 8 pair of rockets, just one on top of them. And I expended probably, we had 8,000, I probably put 4,000 rounds of minigun from the turret into that same area. As we passed over, another one of our Cobras came in to do a BDA, it's a battle damage assessment. Said that there was no one left moving. And I was glad my aircraft commander was a real good rocket shot. So we took care of that. And then next, this is just another picture of LZ Pepper from a different angle to show you all the trees. You know, these were not bare topped hills or ridgelines. These were all very tall trees or jungle, triple canopy jungle. The plan was 3, 4 of the Hueys that we had. We had 1 command and control Huey, 4 lift Hueys, and a heavy fire team of Cobras. And they have Rangers on board. These Rangers were equipped with just their M16s and chainsaws. So, and this is not a new tactic. This is a tactic that was used quite a bit in Vietnam. So the Rangers would rappel down into the trees with a chainsaw. They would use the chainsaw to cut down the trees. And of course, the whole time we were doing that, we were suppressing Charlie with our Cobras. And this is what it looks like after they get in and they start chopping down some of the trees. They wanted to make an area large enough that we could get the Hueys close to the ground, put the troops on the ground. So that was the whole mission. And it actually worked very well. And it took, the problem was Vietnam is very warm and it's very humid. And of course, that's high density altitude, which is not good for any aircraft, particularly helicopters. And our first troop ship went in and he came to a hover, he stopped, and then he started repelling troops out. And he wasn't but maybe 50 feet from the ground, but then he just settled in and he couldn't control it. And he crashed. Fortunately, there was a few injuries, but all the people lived and the crew lived. So the second Huey came in and did the same thing and had the exact same thing happen to him. So we had 2 aircraft down with 8 troops apiece, plus the crew of 4 on the top of the hilltop. And so we were, about this time, we were out of rockets and out of minigun. So we had to go back to the rearming point and refuel, rearm, and the next crew came back in. By the time we came back, they had finally sawed down enough of the trees and got enough clear area and suppressed Charlie around the landing zone sufficiently that we were able to start putting troops in there with monotonous regularity. And again, like I showed on the others, we were providing fire support with our Cobras, both our minigun and with our rockets. So this is just the first week of Operation Delaware, and we stayed. It took us about a week for us to finish setting it up and get all the artillery pieces into LZ Pepper. We had other companies and troops putting in the other LZs all around the area. And during that first week, we flew about 14 to 16 hours average a day. They told us, the flight surgeons, once you hit an 100 hours flight time in the Army, 100 hours in the last 7 days, you had to go into the flight surgeon. The flight surgeon would examine you, and he would either ground you or let you go fly some more. And during Delaware, I think all of our flight surgeons went on vacation. We exceeded that 100 hours per 7-day period by quite a bit. It's estimated, and this is just one day, 380 rockets and 48,000 rounds of minigun ammunition. That's what my ship did. So we were shooting and scooping a lot. And just in the first Cav division on the very first day, not the first week, just the first day, they lost 10 Hueys, 1 Cobra, and 1 Chinook. So it was kind of a bloody first day. Once we got the LZ Pepper set up, then we would bring in our sky cranes, and they would bring in the 105s, 155s with the basic load of ammunition to set up the artillery post. And of course, we were there with our Cobras, covering them the whole time they were doing that. And it was really very interesting because the valley had there was spider holes just everywhere. Charlie was really good at digging holes and finding cover. And we could work around the top of these landing zones, firing our miniguns, firing our rockets. By the time our crane or our Chinook was coming in with supplies, all of a sudden there's people everywhere. It's just amazing. It was fascinating to me to see that they could take that much punishment that we were giving them with our Cobras. And the guys on the ground, they were shooting too. We were just throwing her around because Charlie was hunkered down in a hole somewhere. So then, and this is actually how they delivered supplies to LC Pepper. This, of course, is a Chinook, and there's a berm that runs right around here. It's kind of goes all the way around the top of the landing zone. So the Chinooks would come in and they would hover and they would set their rear wheels inside that berm to kind of give them a little bit of, so they wouldn't be sliding around as they were loading and unloading the aircraft. And then they would drop their rear door, and the people would walk off for the supplies that we usually carried up in here. Then the pilots would raise the nose up so they could just kind of push them out, get them out of the Chinook. And then, of course, they would take the wounded into it. And that's how we delivered people water, ammunition, food, and evacuated our wounded. And, of course, the whole time the Chinooks were in there, we were providing air support around them. And then after the 5th day of Oshawa, Operation Delaware, I was given a day down, a non-fly day, except I had to fly last line recon at the end of it. I was flying a Huey gunship. We had the Cobras at that time were grounded from night flying because Bell Helicopter had been fixed wing attitude indicators inside of a helicopter. And everybody knows that anything fixed wing is substandard, right, guys? So obviously the altitude indicators could not stand the vibration of the helicopters. And they were failing just within 5 to 10 hours. And they would just go bottoms up. And of course in Vietnam, I want to say there's not many lights. Hell, there's no lights, especially up where we were at. You'd see some lights and fires and stuff in the cities, but where we were operating, it was just dead So without a moon, there was just no way to see what you were doing, where you were going. So we did not fly our Cobras at night. So they left us with two B-model gunships, and and the gunships were, we use those for first light recons and last light recons. And that's, last light recon is where you fly around the berm, the perimeter of the berm, we call it, to see if there are any sappers who are trying to work their way in, or if we can spot anybody setting up a mortar, trying to use the last bit of light to zero in their mortars for a mortar attack. So we were doing that, and I was on my very first aircraft commander training flight, so I was flying right seat. Everything was pretty much a no-run until we got a call on guard, which is, military guys know what guard is. It's a emergency frequency, and everybody monitored guard all the time. So if you got in trouble, you turned your transmitter up to guard, and you could talk, and everybody else in the air can hear you. So we heard this call. Two Marine Corps dust officers going into a place called Utah Beach. Talked about that a few minutes ago. They had gotten in, taking no fire. Charlie found them, and now they were taking fire. They were behind some bunkers, not bunkers, sand dunes. And they requested any guns in the area to come over and keep Charlie busy while they get the heck out of there with their wounded. So when we heard the call, we called our Tactical Operations Center, and we said, we heard the call, we're ready to go, got plenty of fuel. He said, go. So we headed over to Utah Beach, and the company size unit of the Viet Cong turned out to be a regiment. So it was, the Marines were in pretty bad shape. The good news, the dust offs got out of there, and they took 12 wounded Marines with them, and the ground commander gave us credit with saving 80 of his remaining people, because our attack runs on Charlie on the tree line disrupted them enough that they were able to regroup and get out of the area before that regiment got over them. So bad news was, in doing that, we took our one gunship, a B-model gunship, took a total of 32 hits, 27 small caliber, 550 cal. I lost my door gunner. In fact, he was shot and went over the side. Crew chief was wounded with a little multiple frag all over him. My left seat, my lieutenant that was in the left seat, took around through both calves. And then I was shot in the right arm, right chest, and the left leg. Our hydraulics were out, controls were really stuck. But a Huey, without hydraulics, you can't fly. It's like driving a car with the power brakes and the power steering, both inoperative. It's very, very rough, and you almost can't hover. We never even try to hover if we have hydraulics out. But anyway, our hydraulics were out. All of our electrical systems were out. Our radios were out. Most of our instruments were not functioning. Annunciator panel, which is our caution lights and stuff like that. A whole bunch of the lights were on. We didn't know what they mean though, because the red had gone through the annunciator panel and all the labels were all spread all over the place. So we ended up, once we got out of the area that we were being shot at, we started heading towards the MASH hospitals. So we started sorting out what we needed to do. Well, my co-pilot couldn't fly the pedals because he'd been shot through both calves. Didn't hit any arteries, didn't hit any bones, so he was lucky. But he couldn't feel his feet, so my feet were okay. So I flew the pedals, and he flew the cyclic and the collective. We flew over towards MASH Hospital, Quantum Tree, and their helipad. And I say we landed. Yeah, you know the old story about any landing that you can walk away from is a good landing, and any landing that you can walk away from and the aircraft is reusable is a great landing. So we did a good landing because the airplane wasn't reusable when we finished with it. In fact, when we landed, we were about this far from the ER entrance in the MASH. I was bleeding, leaking pretty badly from my arm because it cut the brachial artery, the big one that goes through your arm, and it was gushing out of my elbow. I asked my crew chief to come up and asked her if he knew where the pressure point was in your armpit for the arm. And he said, well, I think so, sir. Stick your hand up there and you feel something that's pumping, squeeze it, and he did, and it slowed it down to just a drip. And when we got to the MASH hospital, the medics helped me out of the aircraft. They laid a stretcher down. Well, John Wayne never used a stretcher, right? And I could see the entrance to the door right there. I'm just gonna mosey on over there myself. Well, the next thing I remember, I was laying on a gurney inside the ER. My blood loss was the doctor said about another 5 or 10 minutes and I would not have survived. So I thank the crew chief for knowing his ER stuff. The bullet actually hit on the top of the elbow, but he had to cut all this area out here, and that's where that little bullet that's in the display case over there, that's where he cut that out. And then I evidently got hit in the side. You can see that's about half the stitches on my side. And that was kind of a funny story too, because I was laying there on the gurney and I felt some pain in my left leg. So I looked down at my left leg and there was a nurse down there with a pair of forceps, and she had the forceps inside my leg. What is going on? I looked down, I could feel a little pain from that. It was the first time I'd felt any pain on my leg. And then she pulls something out. It's a piece of metal about that long. I could hear the clink when it went into the container. And then she dug around in a second hole, did the same thing. Another clinky thing went in there. And then the doctor asked me, he was looking at my arm and everything, and he said, he lifts up my arm and he says, "Does your side hurt?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Take some deep breaths." So I did. He says, "I don't think it hit your lung." What hit my lung? He says, "Well, you got a hole there." And I said, "Oh, wonderful." You know, what's this thing? As I was flying back to Contray, and we were hoping that the engine was still going to run, which it did. We didn't have anything else, but that old B model Huey kept flying. I remember I was holding my hand up like this. I thought, oh, how bad is this? So I tried to move my hand, and I saw finger movement. I didn't realize at the time it was only these two bottom fingers. Everything on the top half was no nerve connection whatsoever. So now I'm sitting there, and then the doctor said something I didn't want to hear him say. He says, "Well, son, I think I can save your arm." I said, "Wait a minute, you think I've just got a flesh wound? That's all this is. You know, give me some aspirin, let me go home." You know? So then I started thinking about it. In previous wars, you got shot in the leg or in the arm. They cut the leg or the arm off to save your life. And then I started thinking, oh my God, this is more serious than I thought. And the reason, there was actually only two little holes in my arm. There was that hole up here on top of my elbow, and then there was, there was actually only one hole, because all of this, he had to cut out the, what they call the wound channel. That's where the bullet goes through, because a high-speed impact to human flesh kills everything around for about a half inch. And it doesn't look like it's dead, but it's dead. So he had to open up my arm and lay this flap of skin back so he could cut out all that damaged tissue. And that was a big concern. They left my arm unstitched for almost 2 full weeks because they were afraid of infection and stuff like that. So the nurse would come in, take the bandages off, flip that flap of skin over. She would explain to me, you know, what the blood vessels were and all that other stuff. It was kind of interesting. But anyway, so I finally recovered and I went into Hunter Army Airfield, and then I spent 2.5 years there, got my direct commission, and went back over. The second time I was down at Vin Long, way down in the Four Corps area, and I was, that was a picture of the Vin Long Airfield on the right-hand side. And I was in the air cav. The air cav, the difference between the air cav and the gunship companies that I was working for was the aircraft goes out and looks for Charlie. So you have 3 different types of aircraft. You have the OH-6, which we call the Loach, and we had the Hueys, and then we had the Cobras. So the Loaches would go out and they would sneak and sniff, and I'll show you a cute picture here pretty soon. The Cobras, we would stay between 1,000 and 1,500 feet and circle the Loaches. And the aircraft commander, sole job, fly the aircraft, keep his eye on that Loach. So it was real easy to lose where they were at. And then the Huey would be usually around 3,000 feet. They would be circling. The Air Mission Commander was in the Huey, and they would sort of orchestrate the whole operation. So that's the Scout, that's the Loach. the gunship, and of course the Hueys for lift. We also would always have 4 Hueys in a very, very close location with infantrymen inside of them. They were the ready reaction, RRF, we call them, ready reaction force. If the Loaches did find Charlie, the Cobras would go in and protect the Loaches getting out of there, would engage Charlie as much as they could, and then they would bring in the lift ships, and we would protect the lift ships as they go in and put additional people on the ground. And this is what we would call a standard package. We have 2 Loaches here and here, 2 Cobras here and here, and the CNC is taking this picture. So that was our standard package we'd go to the field with. Okay, so who can see both the Loaches? There's one. There's the other one. So they are in the trees, literally in the trees. As we were orbiting around the Loaches called taking fire, count 7 seconds, we would have ordnance on the ground. But we would, as we were circling around the Loaches, the 2 Cobras, you knew which was going to be the best angle of attack, wherever was closest to that. As soon as it was taking fire, it was hard over, left metal, line up, start firing. So it's a very quick reaction. This is a little bit about Vietnam. This is where I live a whole lot better than the first tour. We did have a lot of monsoonal rain, so sometimes we'd have to use bottom left there, alternate forms of transportation into our village. And that was my hooch here on the bottom right, George Anderson. He's not missing a left foot. That's how deep the water was in our room. This was my hangar that I had. I was the second tour. I wised up and got a little bit smarter, so I was a maintenance officer and test pilot. So I commanded the maintenance section, the scavengers, and this was my hangar that we had 2 Cobras and a Huey in there right now. This was the inside of the hangar. So we had really nice facilities in terms of Vietnam. The Loaches were shot up so often and so frequently that they had a 300-hour inspection. Hueys and Cobras, we had to inspect them every 100 hours. Loaches was 300 hours. The whole time I was there, we never had a Loach that got to 300 hours because they were shot down and had to be sent back to home. So we maintained them in our little Quonset huts there, and all we were really doing is just patching all the holes that they were taking. I had about 95 for the NCOs and techs, and a total of 5 officers working for me. 10 maintenance hours, maintenance man hours per flight hour was our average. And we worked on them outside, inside the hangar, in the revetments, on the flight line. It didn't matter. We were out there doing the whole 9 yards. And once my mechanics and techs got done with it, then I would hop into it. I was one of Vietnam. We had a total of 5 air cavalry troops, and each one of them had 10 to 12 Cobras. And there were 2 of us that were qualified test pilots in the entire Vietnam. So my first month, almost 2 months, I was really kept busy because I had to test fly my own, run my own platoon. Luckily, I had superb NCOs and officers, so they sort of self-maintained, but I had to fly test flights for some of the others. And then we finally got some qualified guys here. And of course, besides the 100-hour inspections on the Hueys and the Cobras, we had the battle damage. This is kind of a poor shot. There really isn't much wrong with this because they didn't lose any life and they didn't draw any blood. But this is a tailrotor drive shaft on the Cobra, and you can see where the bullet went through. And he was lucky it went through the center. Most of the side, the torque will usually tear him up and they'll lose tailrotor control, which is not catastrophic. You just do a running landing if you can find a runway. Didn't have a lot of those. These are some of the aircraft that were lost to us because of damage. They were either shot up or shot down and damaged themselves when they shot down. In the 11 and a half months on my second tour, I total loss to the inventory, 5 Loaches, 3 Hueys, and 1 Cobra. We lost 12 pilots and crew, and I lost 2 of my maintenance guys. So 72, I came home, went over to Human Proving Ground, and then I started developing some of the weapon systems on our Cobra, the towing system, and the 20 millimeter cannon on the front of it. I was involved in both of those tests deeply. We also tested the Hellfire missiles, the flat plate canopy, the upgrade. We went from G models to R models to Q models to S models. These were upgraded engines, upgraded transmissions, the new Kevlar main rotor blades and stuff like that. So that's a lot of the testing that I did at Human. That was really a fun assignment. It's probably one of my most enjoyable assignments that I had. So that goes into a whole other area. Any questions about the Vietnam stuff?
What was your major maintenance issue with the helicopter?
Combat damage. Yeah. The Huey, I cannot praise the Huey or actually the Cobra enough as far as reliability and maintainability. They just lasted very well. So combat damage was our major concern. That and my pilots. You're supposed to pre-flight an aircraft before you take it off. When you come back, you post-flight. So the guy the next day doesn't, so if you find anything that's wrong with it, we can fix it with my night fuel. I couldn't get those knuckleheads to do that to save my soul. So I became the SOB on the flight line. And they would see me out there. And, we did some really creative things to get the pilots to actually look at the aircraft. Because once you land, and I understood where they were coming from. You go out and you shoot all day long. You're exhausted when you get home. You want a beer or harder, and you want a club and you want a shower. And the airplane is just, so that was a common battle, but that was our most common. So, any other questions?
LZ stand.
LZ, landing zone. Yeah. It's basically for a helicopter, it's a tennis ball court size with no trees in it. Anything could be called a landing zone, but it's where everybody agrees and they know where it's at. Most of our rearm refuel points were large landing zones, and they would put the fuel bladders out there, bringing it by Chinook, and then their Chinooks would bring in the ammo, and we just set up and reload, refuel. We never shut the airplane down, just keep it running, and then off we go. Well,
Have you been back to Vietnam?
no,
What was the question?
he asked if I'd ever been back to Vietnam. I have not. I have no desire to go back. I have several friends who have gone over and taken tours of Saigon and Vietnam, and no, thank you. Any other questions?
That was the best presentation in the last 2 years.
It's a good thing I didn't practice all we missed tonight.
Well done.
That was great. Absolutely great.